Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Abundance Matrix Underground podcast. I am in the middle of my psychic liberation series, and today I'm going to dive into a concept I like to call cult hopping. So this psychic liberation series is about removing our psychic tentacles from participation in the entire mechanism of the lack matrix. Now remember, the core belief that supports the entire lack matrix is that there is not enough. There's not enough resources, there's not enough time, there's not enough power, there's not enough money, there's never enough, so something always has to be sacrificed. So cult hopping, as I refer to it, is what happens when we think we've liberated ourselves from lack or from the things that were oppressing us, but the architecture of our inner operating system is still coded to the lack matrix. So it's when we are still being psychically influenced by the lack matrix. And remember, it's incredibly powerful. So I'm not talking about traditional cults necessarily, although they manifest as a result of the lack matrix. But I'm talking about the cult of lack itself, the original cult. It's the one that every institution, every ideology, every political party, and social movement unconsciously mirrors. Cult hopping is the illusion of transformation when we switch religions or identities or join a different movement or get a different political affiliation without ever really dissolving the underlying shadow contracts that bound us to the lack matrix in the first place. And one of the most powerful shadow contracts underneath the cult hopping is the obsession with being good or being right, because we mistake goodness for evolution. But when the nervous system is trained to equate worth with being good, we jump from system to system or group to group seeking that validation instead of creating from that primal, God-given creative urge that actually births heaven on earth. So I want to define a little bit about cult in this psychic liberation context. So the way I'm going to define cult is a closed energetic ecosystem rooted in lack. It's the architecture of lack-based cult the architecture of a lack-based cult is the us versus them mentality. The belief that there's not enough, that there's not enough resources, that we have to belong to the right group or the right ideology in order to receive or be enough or to be valuable or worthy. That obedience and sacrifice is a currency. And the architecture is also connected to the savior class, like the victim, aggressor, savior paradigm. And usually we believe if we're in the savior class or the victim class, then we'll be safe, but we can't be the aggressor. And of course, there's a moral hierarchy, which is based on purity, loyalty, and compliance with the system. And there's internalized surveillance and self-policing. And we also police others. We project. If you haven't listened to the last episode I posted on projection, it's really important because projection is a psychic mechanism of the lack matrix. And then there's the fear of excommunication or not belonging to the group anymore if you don't do the right thing or obey or comply. When we cult hop, the aesthetic of what we're in may change, or the dynamics or the rules, but the architecture of the belief system stays the same. It's just a new set of people in charge, a new set of rules, but the architecture is still the same. So the ideology might be better. It might be better than the previous ideology we were in. The beliefs might be more beneficial to us in many ways, but if the core architecture is still mirroring the lack matrix, then it's just another version of the same thing, of the same sacrifice paradigm. So often people go from being religious or being raised religious into the secular world. Same thing, just different equation. From like a church, being in a church, to a political party, from spirituality to activism, or from science to ideology or wellness to a purity culture, or like a fandom to an identity cult. And because most of us were conditioned to believe that being good is our highest virtue, and that goodness is what earns worthiness, we often unconsciously gravitate towards systems that promise moral certainty. So we have that promise that we are in the right, and that protects us from ever having to be the ones that are sacrificed. So why does cult hopping happen? I believe it happens because humans are humans, first and foremost. That the important thing to understand about every system, every cult, every group, every ideology, or people that subscribe to that ideology, is that humans are humans. That every cult has good people, shitty people, true believers, bandwagon followers, manipulators, true healers, and people who are just authentically confused wanderers. Humans are humans. And so that's why no matter what, you're going to find humans in any system that you enter into. This is the full spectrum of our human expression, of course, the light and the dark. I've talked a lot about how it's important that we accept fully our incarnation, and that includes the light and the dark. We're not at war with one or the other. The contrast in this world it's what the world is built with, and none of it is above the other. Both are necessary. All of it teaches us. Another reason that I believe we cult hop is because we mistake environmental change for internal liberation. So we think if we just go to a different church, or if we leave church altogether and go to activism, or if we leave activism and go live in a temple somewhere, or if we leave whatever, we just go from one thing to another. And that movement actually it's an anomaly when we get out of patterns we've been in. And so it'll open up a door for change, and we learn and we grow and we get to see the world through a different lens. And especially initially, that can be liberating. It can be freeing in many ways because we get to experience a different way of being. But if our core operating system stays rooted in lack, the same mechanisms are at play, and eventually that system that we're now identifying with will become the new external authority that we give our power to. And we might think it's a little bit better, but it's still rooted in lack. And that's why there's an illusion of change, but nothing truly deeply fundamentally changes about the human experience, because we still operate from that primary program of there's not enough, which, as I said in one of the last episodes in this series, is that it defies the very nature of God. The lack matrix defies and blasphemes the very nature of God, because the nature of God is to overflow and to give continuously. So, and I don't mean just give us anything we want, anything. It's not a vending machine. I don't mean that, but I mean needs are meant to be met. Ask and you shall receive. That's the nature of God. So leaving a religion does not necessarily equal liberation. Leaving politics doesn't necessarily equal sovereignty from politics. Leaving activism that may be draining our energy doesn't necessarily lead to liberation, or leaving spirituality, or leaving a belief system. If the goal is still being good or right, all we do is enact the same purity hierarchy in new clothing. And because the nervous system is conditioned to this way of being in the world, this hypervigilance, this belief that there's not enough, this constant trying to prove our worth, this belief that safety basically equals conformity, that worth means we're good, that if we belong, like in order to belong to a group, we have to self-abandon our authentic desires, our authentic truth, our authentic creative urge. And we often believe that stability can only come from an external authority. So when goodness becomes our survival strategy, our creative sovereignty gets buried. If all that matters is that we're good and that we're right, what motivates us to act is different, especially because from the lack matrix perspective, we need the external authority to tell us and to confirm for us what is good and right. So we have this powerful trauma bond with this cult of lack. I've been talking about this in pretty much every episode of this psychic liberation series. And of course, the lack matrix itself is the original cult. It's the belief that there's not enough and you're not enough. And we have been so programmed with this that we operate from this belief unconsciously in ways that we don't even realize. And this lie disconnects us from our birthright, which is that we were created in the image of God, a creator. And creation, not goodness, is our true nature. Creative power is what we are, creative energy, creative life force. So this life force, as I've been reiterating in every episode, is used to fuel lack because our life force creates. And because we've been feeding this system for so long, it has actual entities, principalities that are alive because of it, alive and powerful. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, I think, some of maybe the top 3 even shadow contracts that keep us bound to the lack matrix in this group ideology, the way that we think we need the external authority. So again, I already said the first one, which is the shadow contract of believing that our worthiness comes through being good. If we're good, then we can receive. But we are in and of ourselves not worthy to receive anything. So if I'm good enough, pure enough, right enough, I'll be safe. That's a shadow contract we have with the lack matrix. So again, we're always consciously and unconsciously looking for ways to be good. And good is subjective, and often we have to look to the external to tell us what good is. It disconnects us from our discernment. Another shadow contract that keeps us powerfully psychically bound to the lack matrix is this belief that we have to sacrifice in order to belong. So I must give up my authentic desires or needs or creativity or individuality in order to belong. And remember, there's extremes of all of this. So you have extreme hyper individuality where we disconnect from the idea that we're all connected, which is just as detrimental as extreme hyper collectivism, where we don't see our individuality at all. And remember, the all is in the small. So just like there is no single person on the planet or any life force that has your same fingerprint, that's how unique and individual you are. And everything is connected. You're connected to every human, and we are connected psychically, especially to the overall grid on the planet. So we can't escape the fact that we are connected and that we are individual. It's not one or the other. And abandoning our individuality is just as detrimental as abandoning the whole. So the third shadow contract that I think is keeping us pretty powerfully bound to the lack matrix is the shadow contract of control as a means of survival. So everything's unpredictable in lack. We don't have enough. There's always an enemy. And we have to control the external variables so things always go in our favor because we don't trust. So if I can control myself and others, and if I can control variables, then I can avoid pain. And this keeps us from being in a state of surrender, which is the most powerful state to be in order to receive and overflow. And that's the paradox of abundance, is that we have been programmed with this idea that we have to earn abundance. We have to be worthy of it. We have to work hard for it. And the truth of the matter is, in order to overflow, to receive heaven on earth, this exponential abundance where our needs are met, every need is met, we have to surrender. We have to allow and give up control. And this is a part that keeps us deeply imprinted with lack because we fear surrender because we don't trust. And again, I'm speaking collectively. So how these shadow contracts form, or how they keep us basically trauma bonded to the lack matrix, is number one, they make worth something to be earned. So then we have to constantly look again to the external authorities to tell us if we've earned it or not. They create dependency on this external authority, and they bind our identity to obedience to these external authorities. And they create fear around our authenticity and our creative power, our creative urge. So we suspect our own creative power. These contracts keep us emotionally tethered to systems that feed our life force or feed off of our life force. And external power structures, whether they're religious, political, or ideological, feed on our creative energy. So instead of building the world we were created to build, a world that meets our human needs, our creative energy is siphoned into maintaining the machinery of lack, which is so automatic at this point. It's completely subconscious, most of it. So this cult hopping ideology, or this thing that we do, it's not really an ideology, but this illusion of change as we hop around, it does bring, like I said earlier, it does expand us when we give ourselves a new experience, and especially when we get out of a bubble we've been in. This has been my experience growing up in, I've said this before, but I feel like I grew up in a bubble within a bubble, because even though I grew up in Utah County specifically, which especially when I was growing up was predominantly LDS, and then also being my family when I was really young, being polygamist. So we were even outside of the culture here, and the culture here, especially like the LDS culture, doesn't really like the polygamy aspect of Mormonism at all, or their history at all. And they've tried to get away from that as far as possible. And so there's this like extra shun even in the bubble here. And so when I broke out of my bubble, I was shocked at how much there was in the world that I didn't even realize that there was. But then I had to break out of that bubble and that bubble and that bubble. And you really realize that every system, again, that's rooted in lack is its own bubble unto itself. It's just a different set of beliefs and ideas, but the same mechanisms feeding it. So this illusion of progress is what I want to call it. This illusion of progress, even though, yes, it does change us and it's important to break out of these cults. But eventually, as I said, as you keep popping these bubbles, you realize, wait, whoa, it's all different. It's just all a different shade and variety of the same bullshit. And the cycle, whether it goes from religious to secular to political to spiritual to activism, the vocabulary may change and the external rules may shift, but the rituals may transform. Like we may do different rituals, but the underlining mechanism remains, which is there's not enough. You have to prove your worth. You have to sacrifice. And again, when goodness is our compass, we simply find new authorities to tell us what good means. Disconnecting from that creative intelligence, that creative urge that actually births new worlds. That's why we never create a new system, and eventually everything goes back to the same bullshit. So how cult hopping keeps us bound to the lack matrix is that it keeps our nervous system wired in war mode. It keeps us in hypervigilance, the us versus them mentality, the moral panic that comes from, oh no, people that don't agree with us, and the constant threat scanning, where we're just constantly scanning for threats. It perpetuates psychic trauma bonds because it perpetuates the external validation, which replaces internal truth. It perpetuates the punishment approval, the reward punishment system, which becomes our compass instead of our authentic creative urge. And our identity remains outsourced to the external world. We wait for the external world to tell us who we are and to tell us what we mean and what we believe. So this blocks our creative sovereignty. And when decisions are based on goodness instead of preference, we're out of alignment with our creative sovereignty. When our creativity becomes unsafe, we're out of alignment with our creative sovereignty. When innovation gets replaced by conformity, we're out of alignment with our creative sovereignty. And when our creative urge gets suppressed, obviously, we're out of alignment with our creative sovereignty. So it also makes the lack matrix self-replicating. So we create the same system just in new forms, as I said, but the old architecture stays intact. Fear keeps us looping in the same algorithm over and over. We just sacrifice different things, different people, but the fear, the core beliefs are the same. And when we're obsessed with being good, we stop asking the question, what do I want to create? What's my preference? What's my authentic creative urge? And instead we'll ask, what will make me acceptable? This is what kills the creative urge. And this is what keeps the lack matrix running. So what's the way out of this? Of course, I keep harping on this, but we have to dissolve our shadow contracts with lack. So just a quick refresh on shadow contracts. Shadow contracts exist because we're attempting to get a need met that we're not aware of. So we're doing all this sacrificing. We're doing all this outsourcing of our power because we're attempting to get a need met. We're attempting to have a deeper need, our deeper needs of belonging and safety met. And we don't know how to meet it directly. We don't know how to meet it directly with God. We don't know how to ask and receive because we've been programmed with this whole system. So we have to dissolve those contracts by allowing the needs to be met directly. And again, this is why it's such a paradox for some people, because we think, oh, okay, I need something to change. I need it to be fixed. I need to receive. I need these needs to be met. So what do I have to do to get those needs met? We think of it in terms of an action, but actually it's a state of surrender. It's a release posture. It's a somatic posture of release and openness. It's restorative. It's where we stop and allow and take space and pause. And when we do that, we can begin to notice our inner architecture of our beliefs. And we can ask ourselves, does this system this external system that I'm participating in, require me to abandon myself, my authentic urge? Does it demonize dissent? Does it make belonging conditional? And does it weaponize purity or morality or empathy? That's how we know we're in a shadow contract with the system we're involved in, if it does any one of these things. So these questions are important to ask. And we must notice how deeply we've equated goodness with God when God is creation itself, not purity. Now, creation, you could say, is pure in and of itself, but the energy of creation is new every day. It's new every day. So when we choose abundance as our internal operating system rather than lack, we know that our worth is inherent, number one. We understand that belonging is intrinsic to what we are, that our creativity is natural, and that our preference is sacred, especially our creative preference. So abundance shifts us from I must be good in order to be worthy to I am worthy, therefore I get to create. So what happens when we switch to the abundance matrix? And obviously it's not just a one-time switch. We have to choose it every single day. We have to retrain our nervous system to focus and act from a different belief. So we have to get to the place where we stop needing an enemy to justify how we feel or what we think. We stop needing a hierarchy to prove our worth. We stop outsourcing our truth to some external authority and waiting for them to tell us whether we're right or wrong. And we start creating for the joy of it. Authenticity replaces our purity contracts with lack. Because remember, those purity contracts, I've talked about these in some of the last episodes, but it's these vows that we make of I'm going to be so pure so that I can be the most worthy. It's kind of where all the superlatives lie. So when we do this, this makes space for our creative urge. And that's the force that births heaven on earth. It births it through what we create. And in that, we can reclaim our creative sovereignty. And we'll know we're reclaiming that because we begin to follow our preference and our creative urge and our creative desires. We follow our authentic impulses, our primal instincts. And we follow truth, not tribal reward. So if we're being influenced by the collective and if we're waiting for the group to tell us what to think, we're off track. The group might be right sometimes, and other times they're wrong. So it's not that there's anything externally wrong with these external, or like intrinsically wrong with these external powers. But they may or may not be for you, and they all serve different purposes at different times. And there may be times things are called into your life and then they're called out of your life because the thing itself, that external thing, isn't the truth. It may be a stepping stone on your way to the truth. But the truth is that the kingdom of God is within us, and it's always been the truth. So it doesn't exist in some external authority on earth. So we reclaim our sovereignty when we do these things. Following our creative preference, our creative desires, our authentic urge, and our impulses that come from our primal instincts. And when our life becomes the altar where God's creativity expresses itself. Creation, not being good or pure, is our purpose. So I wanted to end with some practical like journal prompts that you can ask yourself. And I really do recommend actually journaling about this, or even like voice recording yourself if you could talk out loud. I'm a verbal processor, so sometimes that helps me to just record myself answering these questions. But I wanted to give you these questions so that you can start discovering where you might be here. If you're cult hopping, and how to get out of that mimic of cult hopping. So number one, who am I trying to be good for? Great question. What becomes the enemy when I join a system, or who? If I join this system or this belief, this political party or this ideology or whatever, these external things that we feel like we have to join, and it has these group identity to it, ask yourself, who or what becomes my enemy when I join this system? It's actually important to look at that. You'll get a lot of data. What am I afraid will happen if I leave this group that I'm in, or this ideology, or this political party, or if I step away altogether? What am I afraid will happen? Does this system that I'm in, or this ideology, or whatever, this external thing that I'm participating in, does it use fear, guilt, or shame, or purity contracts to keep me loyal? This idea of being pure, you have to be pure. If there really was enough, if I really believed that there's enough, would I choose this system? Would I choose this identity that I'm currently identifying with? Would I choose this ideology if there really was enough? This is a big one in politics, because politics in particular especially have just the whole mechanism of politics have mastered the victim, aggressor, savior paradigm. It uses and leverages the victims of this world, the people who are most vulnerable, and they use it to consolidate power. They use people's vulnerabilities. That's why there's always some group, some vulnerable group that's at the head of all these political discussions. And yes, genuine people, there's people that are just good people that genuinely care. And so they see their political party or politics in general start talking about these vulnerable groups, and they care. So they want to take action. And I want to make sure I clarify that comes from something innate in our humanity, which is that we know we are ultimately connected. We're relational. So we need each other to survive. And we do ultimately have each other's backs. But when we're being manipulated through fear, what we often choose comes at the cost of sacrifice. And this is why we never get out of the system. So that's why it's important to ask yourself, does this system use fear, guilt, shame, or the idea of purity to keep me loyal? If there really was enough, would I choose this identity? Would I choose this ideology? Would I choose this group? And politics in particular, it gives you this whole screen. It's like a filter that gets put before your eyes, And it tells you this is how you need to see the entire world, is through this lens. And only our system is the way to fix it. And if you don't see it this way, you don't care about the needs that need to be met. And in the other day, the last episode that I posted a couple days ago on the weaponization of empathy, I talked about how when political groups, either one, like I say either one because we're given this illusion that there's only two groups and we know that's not true. But the idea in the lack matrix here is that it's either us, this or that, us or them. And only one of us, we'd usually take a group of people that are vulnerable and say, in the name of these people, we either blame these people for all the problems or use these people as our justification for whatever laws we want to pass. And some are good, some are not, blah, blah. I mean, this could be debated for the end of time, but the point is the filter we're all seeing this through, that we're looking at everything through, is that there's not enough. So doesn't matter how we approach the solution, we'll never actually create a solution that truly meets the needs if we continue to believe there's not enough, because then in that case, something always has to be sacrificed because there's not enough. I'm going to be doing a whole episode on Jesus specifically and why the final sacrifice matters in this whole equation, whether or not you literally believe it or you just think he was an archetype or whatever, why it matters that humanity told this story and how powerful it is to even literally believe it, and why it matters because it sets us free psychically. But in that system, I've said this before, but it has played out as far as it can go. That whole lack matrix has played out. The war has played out. The good versus evil has played out all the way to the end, to where we've sacrificed the pure lamb, so to speak. And that's what set us free. So we literally don't need the system of sacrifice anymore. It's over. It's done. It's over. And there's in the New Testament, there's a verse that talks about, I can't remember exactly what it says, so Bible scholars forgive me. I can't remember the exact, but the paraphrase of it is something about when we look at the Old Testament without the release and the liberation that Jesus provided from that old law, our hearts become hardened and we close off. There's like a veil before our eyes because we still live under that sacrificial system. And we'll never be liberated from it. So the New Testament, or the new story, is the kingdom of God is within. The Christ is within our hearts. The oneness with God exists relationally within us, not through an institution outside of us. Not saying you can't be involved or participate in any sort of like group, because we need each other and we're naturally going to do that. But it's when we believe that we have to do it or we won't belong or we're not safe or it's the only group, it's the only truth. And if you don't get on board here, you're bad. It comes from that us against them mentality. That's when it's rooted in lack. And that's when it's participating and perpetuating that whole system. So just going back to the journal prompts, if there was really enough, okay, I already said this one. Would I choose this identity? Where am I using belonging as a substitute for sovereignty? This is so good. Where am I using belonging as a substitute for sovereignty? This is often where we get enmeshed with groups and we don't even realize that we've lost our sovereignty because we want to belong so badly. And any system that you have to abandon parts of yourself to be a part of, that's how you know that you've sacrificed belonging. You've sacrificed sovereignty for belonging, and you can have both. You don't have to have one or the other. That's the beauty of the abundance womb, living in the womb of abundance, because there is enough. It's not either or, it's this and. So, where am I choosing to be good instead of choosing to create? I've said it over and over and over, and I will probably say it over and over again, which is that one of the ways that empaths get stuck in lack is because they become too preoccupied with being good And that in a psychic way, often in ways we don't even realize, we're constantly looking for that validation outside of us of, are we good? Are we right? Are we enough? And it gets us out of in touch with our creative urge. And remember, that's not the purpose. It's not to be good. It's to create, and it's to specifically birth from our unique creative desires, heaven on earth. So what would I create if I believed that my worthiness was innate? What if I believed I was worthy and I was allowed no matter what, even if I failed, even if I didn't do well, even if I made a mistake and I had to learn a really hard lesson, if I believed I was still worthy of a relationship with Source and to flow that relationship, I wouldn't be afraid to take chances. That's the whole entire point of this existence. That's why we can't make being good our main priority, because that's not the point of being here. It's to create and to learn and to make mistakes. So I just want you to know that you're not here to find the perfect cult to join. And you might even not even realize that you're in a cult, but the entire system is a cult. Remember that. This is not about singling out one type of group. It's infiltrated everywhere. This whole belief system, this mindset that there's not enough and that we have to sacrifice, the sacrificial system, has been in place for thousands of years on this planet. It's powerful. It's been sacrificed to, literally. Animals have been sacrificed to this belief. Humans have been sacrificed to this belief. Energy has been sacrificed. And I'm talking about human blood, actual death. Like, this is why it's called a death cult. It's death, blood was required. It's just become more sophisticated now. And now we give energetically. Although some people still sacrifice in a physical way. But we're no longer under sacrifice. We're no longer under that. So we're here to become sovereign from it, to unbind our shadow contracts that keep us in war mode and in scarcity mode and in survival mode. Liberation is not about just transferring your allegiance from one group to another. It's about stepping out of the algorithm of lack entirely. Entirely. It's realizing that lack is the original cult. And that abundance is our original truth. So you were created by a creator in the image of creation itself. You are innately worthy and you are already held. Your purpose is not to be good. Your purpose is to create. So I hope this was helpful for you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and I will see you in the next one.